Georgios and I work for the Mediterranean Institute for Nature and Anthropos, or shortly MEDINA, an NGO based in Athens. I want to thank warmly the organizers for inviting me to this meeting and for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about two significant World Heritage Sites, my country host, Matera and Mount Athos. They are included in the list because of their outstanding cultural and natural heritage. Matera are located in central Greece, in Thessaly Plain, and are breathtaking rock pillars that host on their tops monasteries of exceptional architecture. Monks could venerate gardens isolated from the rest of the world there, as they had total control of their access. Mount Athos is the beacon of Orthodox Christianity, another unique site which is self-governed, also isolated and accessed only by sea, a place dedicated to the mother of God. To honor her, it is inhabited only by men for more than 1,000 years now. Now, a key topic of this meeting is integrated approaches for management and protection of sites. These approaches are gaining ground the last decades. I'm going to refer briefly to what they are and why they are important, as well as to the role and importance of heritage for society. MEDINA is an organization that promotes integrated approaches for the sustainable management of nature and culture and supports relevant projects within Ramsar, IUCN, and the World Heritage Center. All around the world, there are only 31 mixed properties, that is, sites that fulfill criteria for natural properties and cultural properties. Greece is likely to host 2 of them, since as early as 1988. Now, apart from the fact that Matera and Mount Athos fulfill certain World Heritage criteria, they have a specific element in common, and that's their spirituality. It is true that spirituality is considered an attribute of culture, but in this case, this quality is so characteristic and strong that it deserves to be mentioned separately. The spiritual dimension of these 2 World Heritage sites is so profound that one can talk of it as if separate from other cultural elements. I'm going to refer very briefly to a few key terms that UNESCO uses for the sites included in the World Heritage list. First one is the outstanding universal value, which is a natural or cultural importance so great that it goes beyond national boundaries and is of common importance in the future generations for all humankind. Cultural heritage includes monuments, architectural works, movable objects, groups of buildings, sites and landscapes, either works of men or a combined work of nature and humans of outstanding universal value. From certain points of view, such as history, art, science, place in the landscape, aesthetics, ethnology or anthropology. Now, natural heritage includes natural features such as physical formations, geological and physiographical formations, habitats of threatened species, and natural sites from several points of view, such as scientific or conservation ones. Mixed are the properties that fulfill one or more cultural criteria and one or more natural criteria according to the World Heritage List. The 10 type criteria are 6 related to the cultural heritage and 4 of them to the natural heritage. Sites must also meet the conditions of integrity, that is, the measure of wholeness and intactness of the natural and or cultural heritage, and its attributes and authenticity, that is, to maintain their distinctive character and components. So, we will start with Matera. The site fulfills 4 cultural and 1 natural criteria. It is the second most important monastic center after Mount Athos, the site located in central Greece at the edge of Thessaly Plain, one of the most fertile areas in Greece. Matera means floating, suspended in the air, hence the word meteor. The ancient rock pillars rise over 400 meters from the river Peneus Valley. They were created in the Tertiary period, that is 60 million years ago, by the Tyke River deposits, and then were further transformed by earthquakes and sculptured by rain and wind into a variety of spectacular shapes. Only a few kilometers south of the site, Theopeter Cave is located. It is very impressive in shape. It means the Rock of God, and is one of the most important archaeological sites in the broader area. In the cave, indications were found of an uninterrupted use since 50 millennia ago, that is since the Paleolithic period, and its use continued up to 5,000 years ago. It is the site where the oldest man-made structure is located. A stone wall that blocked part of the entrance, constructed 23,000 years ago during the coldest period of the last ice age. It is also the site that contains evidence of two greatly significant transitions in human history, that of the replacement of Neanderthals by modern humans, and the transition from a society of hunters and gatherers to a society of farmers, exactly after the end of the last ice age. Strange enough, there is no reference in ancient sources about Meteria, despite the uniqueness of the area. But there are records in written sources about the first hermits to inhabit the area, originally during the 9th century, in hollows and fissures in the rock towers. They met only on Sundays and special days to worship and pray together in a church built at the foot of the rock. There is no information on the exact dates that the monastery were established. However, there are references of basic monastic state that was established in the 11th and 12th centuries. By the end of the 12th century, many monks had been inhabiting the site. In 1344, Athanasius Kinovitis from Mount Athos arrived with a group of followers and established Great Meteoron Monastery. The monastery was perfect for those seeking solitude. Access, as in all other monasteries, was completely controlled, deliberately difficult, requiring either long ladders and pulleys and nets that carried both people and goods, which were drawn up when monks felt threatened. By the 16th century, 24 monasteries were already built. During the following centuries, the monasteries thrived, protected by location from the hardships of the Ottoman occupation. After the 17th century, though, the communities declined due to raids and invasions. During the 1920s, steps were cut into the rock, making access easier, especially to pilgrims and visitors. In all the monasteries in Meteora, everything is shared. All monks share the same food, have no property or money of their own, and they try to live by 3 rules: chastity, lack of property, and obedience to the elders. Today, unfortunately, only 6 monasteries are operating, they're active. It's the Monastery of St. Nicholas and Apopsas, the Monastery of Holy Trinity, the Monastery of St. Stephanos, Lusano Monastery, Varlam Monastery, and Great Meteoro. Only 6 months occupy all the monasteries in total. 2 of them are female monasteries, St. Stephanos and Lusano, and 4 remaining ones are male monasteries. Meteoran monasteries are renowned for a unique architecture, iconography, murals, and the long-term support to different kinds of art, such as manuscript copy, calligraphy, woodcrafting, and embroidery. The Cretan monk Ioannis Trelizas, one of the greatest painters of the 16th century, painted frescoes in several monasteries, as well as painters Theophanis and Franco Catalano. Many artists have been inspired by the impressive Meteora landscape during its centuries-long history, and the site has been the shooting location of films, or has served as inspiration for a number of works of art. Meteora is a site with rich natural heritage, among which feature a mixture of mountains and foothills covered by pastures and oak-dominated forest. The area is crossed by Litheros River, which is a tributary of Pinios River, one of the largest rivers in Greece. And a great number of nesting birds can be found in the area. Some 10 of them are endangered, such as the black kite and the Egyptian vulture. There is also a plethora of endemic flora species. And the area is a special protection area for birds and a Natura 2000 area. And now we move on with Mount Athos. The site fulfills 5 cultural criteria and 1 natural. It is a self-governing monastic republic, the greatest monastic center of Orthodox Christianity and a biodiversity hub. It hosts more than 2,000 monks in 20 monasteries and their dependencies. Mount Athos is located at the eastern part of the Chalkidiki Peninsula in northern Greece, which protrudes 50 kilometers into the Aegean Sea and has a width of between 7 and 12 kilometers. Its highest peak rises over 2,030 meters. Although it is linked to the land, access to the site is possible only by boat. The number of visitors is restricted, and a special permission is needed for those wishing to enter, valid for a specific number of days. But we will talk about this in more detail later. Athos Peninsula's history goes back to a very distant past. Legend has it that Athos the giant threw a huge rock against Poseidon during the Gigantomachia, the mythical battle between the Greek gods and the giants. The stone landed where the Athos Peninsula is now located. Xerxes, the king of Persia, in the 5th century BC, when he invaded Greece, attempted to dig a canal through the Athos Peninsula because the waters around it are extremely dangerous. He did not make it. He attempted to round the peninsula, but had no luck and lost his fleet. And 10 years earlier, another king of Persia, Darius, had also lost a 300-boat fleet at the same site. Now, according to Athonite tradition, the Holy Virgin Mary landed at the peninsula by accident, driven there by a sudden storm, on her way to Cyprus to visit Lazarus, accompanied by St. John the Evangelist. She was overwhelmed by the wonderful and wild natural beauty. She blessed it and asked for her son for it to be her garden. A voice was then heard saying, "Let this place be your inheritance and your garden, a paradise and a haven of salvation for those seeking to be saved." So the mountain from then on was consecrated as the garden of Mother of God and was out of limit for all other women. Monks were there from the 3rd and some claim from the 3rd century AD when Athos was still partially pagan. The number grew with the centuries. Byzantine emperors always favored the mountain and supported it financially. The first small monastery was built in the 9th century. During that time, by a crucible of Emperor Basil I, Mount Athos was declared a place of monks, and no lamer, farmers, or shepherds were allowed to settle. In the mid-10th century, its borders were already marked. In 1963, the monastery of Great Lavra was founded, which is the largest and most prominent of the 20 monasteries existing today, with the support of Emperor Nikiforos Phokas. By the 16th century, after 200 tranquil and prosperous years, all monasteries were built. Already since the 15th century, the Ottoman Empire had vanquished the Byzantine Empire. The Ottomans, however, respecting Mount Athos and its independence, was somehow guaranteed. This did not stop the Ottomans, though, from imposing very heavy taxes on the monasteries, which led to an economic crisis during the 17th century. The crisis forced the monks to adopt the so-called Idiorhythmian lifestyle, which is a Hermetic variant of Christian monasticism, where contrary to the former equinobiotic system, monks have private property, work for themselves, and are totally responsible for their subsistence. Despite the hardships, Mount Athos had a prominent role in modern Greek enlightenment in the 18th century, offering high-level education. Russian Tsars had the monasteries with large donations during the period of the crisis, and in the 19th century the number of monks had revitalized with the patronage of the Russian government. By the early 20th century, the number of monks had reached the highest point in Mount Athos history, rising over 7,000. When the First Balkan War ended, the Ottomans were forced out of Greece and Mount Athos came under Greek sovereignty after World War I. During the Second World War, the Nazis respected the sign and never bombed it. In 1971, the number of monks on the Holy Mountain reached a low point of 1,100 monks, but since then the monasteries are undergoing a steady renewal. Actually, in 2009, the number reached again 2,000 souls. Many of them, especially the youngest, are very well educated. Today, all Athos monasteries are equinobiotic. Mount Athos is governed by a peculiar administrative system under Greek constitutional law, deriving from this millennial-old tradition. After the Balkan Wars, the monastic community declared that they recognized that at the face of the then kings of Greece, the lawful sovereigns and successors of the emperors who built the monasteries, proclaiming the Mount Athos territory as part of the then Kingdom of Greece. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is responsible for the peninsular political affairs. The civil government represents the Greek authorities, is responsible for the good application of the laws of Greece and for security. However, Mount Athos is self-governed by representatives of the 12 monasteries, which form the Holy Community. There is also an executive committee, the Holy Administration, with one monk acting as head. Spiritual guidance is provided by the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople. No one has been born on the Holy Mountain for more than 1,000 years. To honor Virgin Mary according to tradition, no females are allowed on the mountain. This tradition has been respected for hundreds of years, with few exceptions of women who entered the site either by accident or in disguise. The number of male visitors is also controlled to preserve the spiritual character of the site. Approximately 100 Greeks and 10 foreigners are allowed to enter each day. A special visa is needed for that, and visitors must make arrangements well ahead. Access to the site is only by boat, and most visitors leave from the village of Veranoupolis, which is the closest settlement to the Holy Mountain. The monks in Mount Athos live in monasteries and their dependencies, smaller monastic lodging types such as kitel, cells, huts, retreats, hermitages, and caves. The monasteries of Mount Athos have in their possession a huge number of invaluable medieval art treasures, among which icons, liturgical vestments and objects, codices and other Christian texts, holy relics and imperial crucibles, that is, golden ornaments representing a seal attached to a decree issued by Byzantine emperor. The Athonite school of painting has influenced the history of Orthodox art. Until relatively recently, no systematic study in archiving has been conducted, but since the mid-1980s, an EU-funded effort to catalogue, protect and restore them is underway. It is estimated, though, that the entire task will not be completed before several decades will pass, due to the sheer number of such artifacts. The monasteries of Mount Athos represent a typical layout of Orthodox monastic establishment. They are square, rectangular, or trapezoidal fortifications edged by towers. These fortifications constitute the perimeter of a consecrated place, in the center of which is the community church, called the Catholicon, which stands alone. This type of religious architecture had a lasting influence in the Orthodox world, and it was adopted as far away as Russia. Since the 10th century, Mount Athos has been closely associated with the history of Orthodox Christianity. In the 11th century, it became the principal spiritual home of the Orthodox Church. And after the fall of Constantinople in 1453 and the Autocephalous Patriarchy of Moscow in 1589, it kept its prominent role. It is widely accepted that it has kept even today its universal and exceptional significance. The practices and the philosophy of the monks dictate the careful management of the natural resources, such as the abundant forests. Traditional farming practices and forestry, along with the restricted access to the sites, no grazing and no hunting, have contributed to the maintenance of a rich natural environment that has received international recognition. More specifically, Mount Athos coastal and marine areas host a rich biodiversity, such as Monk's Fields, as no commercial fishing is allowed in 50 meters distance around the peninsula. The site also hosts remnants of many types of Mediterranean-type forests, as well as chestnut forests. It is also a place with great fauna and flora diversity, including endemic and endangered species, among which wild boars and roe deer. And it is worth mentioning that the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, which has a green agenda and is an ardent supporting of environmental movement, has great influence on environmental affairs in Mount Athos. UNESCO places great importance on the community conserved areas, and Mount Athos fulfills the criteria as it is a self-governed community able to take decisions affecting the entire site. The situation is completely different in Meteora, where a plethora of decision makers and the complex jurisdiction system is making holistic management very difficult. Mount Athos is accessed like an island, only by sea, so it has total control of the number of people wishing to enter, controlling this way its spiritual and natural environment. This practice has maintained unaffected the spirituality of the entire site. Meteora receives large and uncontrolled numbers of visitors for its spiritual, cultural, and natural heritage, including women and children. As a result, the large visitor numbers have a great impact on spirituality, endangering the ascetic way of life of monks. For example, a group of monks under Emilianos moved in the 1960s to Simonopetra Monastery in Mount Athos, seeking solitude and tranquility. To reduce the negative impacts, each monastery has a visiting hour program and restricts access to several parts of the monastery.
In conclusion, wide accessibility of monasteries may be socially desirable, but it may undermine, on the other hand, the spirituality of monastic sites. The World Heritage Center recognizes the coexistence of cultural and natural elements of heritage. So does the more recent Faro Convention and many other multilateral conventions, such as Ramsar and IUCN. Traditional methods for their protection and management in the past dealt with these two aspects separately. Ecologists dealt with the natural environment, and cultural professionals dealt with the cultural heritage. These methods, along with top-down approaches, led to failures in the protection of the natural and cultural environment. Integrated approaches have gained ground during the recent decades. It has been proved they provide more sustainable outcomes, taking also into account the opinions of the public by using participatory methods. Integrated approaches work best for all protected areas, but they are considered a must, a necessity for sites such as mixed World Heritage properties. That's why the Holy Community of Mount Athos, encouraged by the World Heritage Center, is already preparing a management plan that uses integrated approaches for its rich natural and cultural heritage, in close collaboration with the Greek Ministries of Culture and Environment, and of course UNESCO's World Heritage Center. Now, a few things about heritage and its role. Heritage is considered as a vehicle for national identity, a source of pride for people about the glorious past, such as great architecture, monuments, or achievements. However, in some countries, heritage is not used as much as possible in national, regional, and local heritage strategies, because only elites, such as academics and individuals, have the privilege to interact closely with heritage. The public remains a distant witness to the decisions of others. But heritage value gets reduced when it is isolated from ongoing life, because heritage is not only about the past, but about the present and the future. It's not only a thing to conserve or protect, but to be modified and enhanced. Objects and places in themselves are not important. They get important because of the meanings and uses that people attribute to them and the values they represent. The Faro Convention has introduced some very interesting proposals on heritage. Heritage values should not be determined only by professionals, as they are no longer the only ones to interpret heritage values. Values should be identified in cooperation with citizens, both individuals and communities, so that artifacts and sites are no longer interpreted out of their context. This way can become part of the present historical consciousness, which leads to new motives and methods for their use and preservation, and allows them to become living elements of the complex identity of people and communities. To sum up, Greece is blessed with two outstanding sites, which are both located at spectacular natural settings. They are both monastic complexes incredibly rich in cultural heritage, and both have great influence in the Christian Orthodox world. Orthodox Christianity is an important aspect of the national identity for many Greeks and a source of pride. That's why the preservation in a pristine condition is considered a necessity. However, the preservation of the heritage should not be an end in itself. Instead, it should be the object of broadening the well-being of individuals and the wider expectation of society. And heritage, seen before in more narrow meanings as symbols of national unity and pride, is being increasingly seen as a much broader phenomenon, one that can contribute to political ideals, prosperity, and to social cohesion. Thank you very much for your time.